The path of knowledge versus the path of love, devotion, surrender and compassion. Hello, this is Chris speaking, Shores of Infinity, with a video about the path of knowledge, Jnana, versus the path of devotion, Bhakti. So, we will have a look today about the pros and cons of these two paths that seem to be very different, opposite of each other actually. But as it has been suggested by many sages, they're actually two sides of the same coin. The path of knowledge and the path of devotion or compassion. And they both have pros and cons, and how to avoid those, I will suggest or will show a possible loophole at the end of the video. So usually people choose either the path of knowledge or the path of devotion. The path of knowledge is very much like the original Buddhism, to understand everything, or also the ancient Greek philosophy. But all of them have never been talking about the dual, simple, logical knowledge of the day-to-day mind. They were talking about intuitive knowledge. You can download it. You have to be open to it, and you have to be empty of all kinds of bullshit first. But here lies the danger, because we don't know, firstly, we don't know anything else but the dual thinking and dual knowledge, logical, analytical knowledge. So the danger is there to confuse those two and to think you know all kinds of stuff, but actually you only read it. It has not come from within, it came from without. And then nothing really happens. You think you're enlightened, but you're only very intelligent and very educated. That's the disadvantage of the path of knowledge, Jnana, as it is called in Sanskrit. And the advantage is that you can progress very fast, and it's very pointed, like an arrow. Like an arrow. It's pointed like an arrow or a bullet. It's piercing through all the veils, if done correctly. Then let's have a look at the pros and cons of the Bhakti, of the devotion, compassion, love, surrender yoga. Yoga meaning reunification with the divine. Bhakti means devotion or surrender. So if you really do this surrender, if you're full of devotion and empty basically, then you cannot err, because it's not about knowing. There are no mistakes in this path, because you're an empty vehicle, an empty vessel waiting to be filled with divine bliss. So the advantage is that you cannot be misled by the mind. The disadvantage is that because you don't use the mind at all, you can be all over the place, somewhere in the subtle, in the vital realm, and don't know where you are, and you get lost, and you think you're very enlightened, but actually you're just lost. You can get stuck easily and distracted easily by very comfortable emotions of bliss and love and compassion, and everything is wonderful. Which has happened to many mystics, and that's why it is often said that the mystical religious path is different than the path of enlightenment. They both are leading towards the same goal, or towards the same end, but they are indeed very different paths, and you can get stuck in both of them, in either of them. Now the funny thing is that they're two sides of the same coin. So in the end, for the last step, in its last extreme, you need the Bhakti to complete the Jnana Yoga. You need the devotion to complete the knowledge. And the other way around too, you need the knowledge to complete the devotion, the Bhakti. Only then can you complete the journey. The devotional, compassionate path needs the clarity of the knowledge, of the intuitive knowledge. And the path of knowledge needs the surrender, the complete surrender, the submission of the bhakti, of the devotion path. Very few gurus or enlightened masters, or whoever you want to call them, have walked both paths, and those usually went faster and farther than many others. For example, Meher Baba or Shiva Puri Baba. Examples for people who only went on the bhakti path are most of the Sufi teachers like Rumi or Hafiz. And examples of people who only went the knowledge path are Jed McKenna and UG. But Jed McKenna is a good example of someone who went all the way, mostly with the path of Jnana, with the path of knowledge, and wasn't any obstacle for him that he didn't do much of the other paths. Someone who is an example who went very far on the devotional, the compassion path, the bhakti path, was Jesus. Also Muhammad, but they're maybe not the best examples because they're founders of religions. So now the loophole, the solution I promised to you at the beginning of the video is what Sri Aurobindo calls the integral yoga. Sri Aurobindo said also it's not enough to just go one yoga or one yoga after one another. We don't have time for that. Our life is too short. We have to speed up the process. So not only did he combine the best aspects of Jnana and Bhakti yoga, of knowledge and devotion, he supplemented it also with karma yoga, the yoga of selfless work, and of the original tantra. Karma yoga means you work for some higher goal without expecting a reward. This is a very good exercise to calm down the ego or to diminish the ego. And the original tantra, or at least half of the original tantra, takes away this edge of wanting to achieve something. And many of these original paths, the ones we call yoga, you want to achieve something, you want to master something. And this, of course, is fodder for the ego. You need something to balance that. And that is tantra, which is a bit similar to bhakti yoga, to devotion. It's even more surrender. It's an openness to a more female path. It's a very soft and flexible and receptive path. Also, it does not condemn Maya. Usually we always think of Maya as our enemy. Not in Tantra. Maya is also a manifestation of the divine, especially of the more female aspects of the divine, of creation, of life. So here we do not reject life, and renunciation is not a renunciation of food and certain foods and sex and enjoyments, but it's a renunciation of identification and fixation and expectation. It's more adventurous. It's open to surprises. So with a combination of these four, he promises a much quicker progress, if progress is the right word for it, which is probably not. He rejects Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga. Raja Yoga is mostly about siddhis, and Hatha Yoga is about caring for the body, especially for the nadis and the prana. I'm not sure if that is correct. You have to see for yourself. I also included for myself, I also included Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga. I found it very helpful. And Sri Aurobindo also started his journey of enlightenment with learning pranayama, which is part of Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga. So it's a bit tricky to claim that you don't need it when you yourself have learned it. So you can't prove that you don't need it because you have learned it It's more actually of a proof that you do need it at the beginning, but only in the beginning probably. So the video is already much longer than I planned to. So thank you to all my patrons. Thank you for joining me as a patron. Thank you for liking and subscribing. It helps other people to find this channel. Leave your comments below and see you soon.